Why is it that when we're in nature, we can feel a beautiful connection? And why is it we seem to connect to God via nature? Why do I and other people find trees so important? Why is it that I had an awakening under a tree? And why is it that Buddha did also? What is so special about trees? For me, trees are the transmitters and receivers of the earth. They are the connection from the seen to the unseen. Modern towers of all kinds being based around the original towers of the world, which are our trees. They hold great power. Out of all of nature, they are some of our biggest and most abundant life forms on earth. Trees you will find all over the world, throughout all of history, being one of the earth's most common feature, if not its most common feature. If we ask a child to draw a picture of life, they may well include a tree. Part of the earth's ecosystem. Without trees, we essentially could not live. They are the very breath we breathe. Relating to the story of creation and God's breath entering us to give life, the closest form we have physically are the trees. Also, trees are mentioned in the Bible more than any other living thing other than God and the people. There's a tree on the first page of Genesis, the first Psalm, the first page of the New Testament, and the last page of Revelations. Whether it's a fall, the flood, or the overthrowing of the Pharaoh, every major event in the Bible has a tree marking the spot. There are trees alive today that were already ancient in the time of Christ. Trees can live as long as 10,000 years. Living just 10 years, we get blinded by the short-term gain and lose sight of eternity. If we want to look at eternity or a form of that in the modern world, we only have to look to our trees and nature. And also in the Bible, every character has a tree associated with them. Noah received the olive branch. Abraham sat under oaks. Moses stood barefoot in front of the burning bush. Zacharias climbed the sycamore fig. The blind man saw people as if they were trees walking. The disciples gathered on the Mount of Olives. Even when we look back to the start of told creation, it mentions trees. In the Garden of Eden, there are 2 trees, one that gave life and the other called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. These trees were said to be designed for the benefit of humans and were part of the original paradise. But this is something I go on about all the time, the power of trees and nature and the connection to something much higher. But what other insights can I offer? There is a debate whether Jesus died on the cross or he actually died on a tree.
This planet has, or had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper. Which is odd, because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained. And lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And then, one day, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, one day, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change.
The idea that Jesus was crucified on a tree is based on some passages of the New Testament that use the Greek word xylon, whose meaning is wood or tree, to refer to the instrument of his death. Master Jesus was crucified on a tree according to Apostle Peter. Acts 5:30, the God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree. Acts 10:39, and we are the witnesses of all things which he did both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, who they slew and hanged on a tree. Acts 13:29. And when they had fulfilled all what was written of him, they took him down from the tree. However, we also have passages which talk about a cross. Matthew 27:40, and saying, Thou that not destroy the temple, and buildest in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Matthew 27:42, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. Mark 15:30, Save thyself and come down from the cross. Now, although the writings do seem to come from different places, one more associated with the Jehovah's Witness understanding, the other side related more so to traditional Christianity, for me this does not matter. So we seem to have two understandings, two words, cross and tree. Now, reading online and through different interpretations, it states it's quite possible that the word cross and tree were used interchangeably, like cool and neat and awesome are used in the modern slang. In our modern slang, those words have completely different meanings, but technically we use them in the same way for the exact same things. Since a cross is made of wood taken from a tree, it is not unreasonable to assume that people potentially called crosses trees. Historical evidence suggests that Jesus was probably hung on a cross, and there is also talk of a stake with no cross beam, which to me sounds a little like a tree stump. But regardless of whether cross or tree, ultimately the cross is made of wood. And the word wood is also associated with the word logos, which is associated with the word and meant to be the word of God. So all these things seem interchangeable. One insight in regard to the wording is that God, or the word, moulded man, and wood could be moulded into all things just like clay. And further to this, up until a particular time in history, most things in a house, including the house, would have been made of wood. Even today, a huge majority of things are made from wood, but in previous times it was almost all things other than those made out of a metal, stone or type of fabric, and some of those items even being relatable to wood. Remember, Jesus' father was also a carpenter. Carpenters craft wood, word, God, Jesus, all being related. And apparently the only physical description of Christ says he looks like a small plant or tree. Isaiah 53:2. He grew up in a carpenter's home. He talked about seeds of faith and said that the kingdom of heaven was like a tree. He called disciples from under trees and sinners from their branches. His favourite place to pray was in an olive grove. The only thing he ever harmed was a tree. The only thing that could harm him was a tree. It states there was no point trying to drown him, he'd just walk away. The only thing that could kill Jesus was a tree. Why? It states because he who dies on a tree is cursed. Not he who was stabbed, stoned or starved. He who dies upon a tree. In some, it states Jesus died on a tree so we wouldn't have to. Why is this? The concept of cursing and blessing in association with the tree is found throughout all of the scripture. In Genesis, Eve and then Adam ate the fruit from the tree which they were forbidden to eat. And in Revelation it speaks about the eternal state includes those who eat from the tree of life. A tree was involved in the entry of sin into humanity through the tree in the garden. And the answer to the sin, it seems, for humanity is through the cross, again wood, again relating to the trees. And the ultimate removal of sin in eternity through the tree of life. So even the Bible is highlighting the significance of the tree. Under Mosaic law, those who were hanged on a tree were cursed. The law made it illegal to leave the body hanging overnight. This law applied to Jesus, who was executed on a tree or a cross. Although he had done no wrong, Jesus' dead body was removed from the cross on the same day of his death. Jesus took the curse of sin upon himself to redeem us from that sin. So not only is it the most present feature on the earth, a connector, a transmitter, but also an asset which all things can be made from, if not made from wood, used to either power machinery to help in the aid, or used as buildings or used as some structure or framework to help something else be made. Harvested the trees throughout history, chopped down. In relation to Jesus, Jesus was also a connector of the seen and unseen that was chopped down or killed and used for the purpose of the elites, just like wood. The trees and Jesus have more than one link. Trees like Jesus give rather than take. Jesus on the cross is not a pretty sight. So why did God use a tree? One reason could be Jesus never took, he only gave. He never owned a house. The only animal he ever rode was borrowed. He could have dressed like King Solomon, but was only recorded to have owned one coat. In many ways, trees are like Jesus. They give and they keep giving. They give life and beauty. They give shade and rest. They clean the air. They hold back erosion. They offer shelter, food and protection. The worst possible thing to use a tree for is to kill someone, as it is the complete opposite of that act. It gives, it never takes. A crucifix is a picture, an object, of how low humanity can sink, taking the very things that have provided life and turning it into the complete opposite object. Flipping the W on wood gives us the word mood, like I've shown before. Like explained before, nature and trees can change our mood, change our outlook. Imagine that this can only be possible in a positive way if the trees are alive. Then think of all the dead wood in your home. Could this somehow be affecting your mood? All is wood. As when out in nature with the living wood, our mood changes, so why not the other way round? With all this said, Jesus, God, can be connected to via the trees. Regardless if Jesus was crucified on a cross or a tree, the wood, the tree, still seems to be important. If Jesus was crucified on a tree, you imagine what that would mean. Every time you connect to a tree, you are connecting to him. When he died, his energies, consciousness entered the trees and ultimately became all. As explained, the trees create a system, the system of information across the whole world. So when they say God is all around you, God is everywhere. He truly is. Jesus being the very consciousness of all things. God being the consciousness of all things. And the most powerful connector to the seen, unseen, to consciousness, to God, to Jesus, seems to be our trees. When I sat under a tree, God spoke to me. For me, the tree was the key part. It was the mediator. It was the connection element. With this said, even if Jesus was not killed on a tree, he would still be connectable via the trees, as they are the connection to the unseen. With all this said, I just want to fall back and highlight you. Because yes, the trees are the most important part in terms of us connecting to something, in terms of a mediator. But the most important part of any equation is you. You are the highest treasure in the whole of existence. And further to that, you do not need the trees to connect. You can do it all on your own. I think what I'm trying to express here is tools and aids have always been used in all type of activity. And if there is one tool on this realm which you can use to connect yourself to something higher, that would be nature and the trees. As they seem to empower us, elevate us, like a booster of sorts. Via us connecting to the trees seems to create the most powerful of connections. But it seems man have taken that to their head and have taken advantage of everything else due to that knowing. So yes, you may be a treasure, but the next treasure to you and something to aid you are the trees. The way to Jesus, the way to God, consciousness, whatever name, is through thyself, and thyself's tool is nature. Now, I'm not saying other items aren't connectors, such as crystals and gems. For me, they are. But again, they are related to our ancient giant trees of the past. What I am saying is the trees are one of, if not the most powerful of connectors one can choose in a methodology of finding the true self, finding God and finding love. As when you connect the main And the first thing you will feel is love. Everything else is second to that.
What's God like?
Well, first of all, God is everything, so he is like everything. He is everything. There's nothing that he isn't like.
Is he like a man?
I don't know. Everything, he lives in everything on this earth.
Love and light.